Thank you all. Thank you, Ted. This is, as you mentioned, a proud day. I'm beyond proud. I've had some incredible moments in the game, and today certainly is at the top of that list. To be a partner with Houston Dynamo Football Club and all that encompasses has been a goal of mine since I finished playing. Look, I've had friends who I've played with who I now call brothers and family, and all they could do is tell me how great Houston is. And I've got my butt kicked here a few times, so it's good to finally join the winning team. It really is. And look, I've taken a lot from this game in the last, well, forever really, but as a professional for 25 years, I took a lot. And yes, I gave my blood, sweat, and tears to it, but it's important that I give back. And I know that sounds philanthropic, and that there's a part of that. What I mean is there are so many elements to a football club that are important to me. The fans are the lifeblood or the bedrock of any football club. I remember playing for Everton Football Club for 10 years, and I saw the same faces every single weekend, and they were there 30 years before me, and they'll be there 30 years after me. And so I understand the importance of community connectivity, a culture that's created through the fan base, and that synergy with the organization. Why Houston? I've spoken to a number of clubs and a number of groups that want to get into soccer, and we've talked, and I've advised, and we've had great conversations with the thought of possibly joining the organization, and nothing really stuck, not because they weren't great people, but because the synergy wasn't there. And when I met with Ted and we talked about the Dynamo and the Dash and his vision, I immediately jumped out of my seat. I got so excited because so many of the thoughts and the hopes and the visions for both clubs aligned with exactly what I thought and the way that I thought a football club should be run. And I often say I've seen the upside of down and the bad side of good, and in football I've seen it all, and I'm thankful for that. But part of that is being able to use that experience and give back in a major way to a championship winning organization. Look, I know that Ted outlined the pillars of the foundation, the success, and that's a commitment to success on the field. Of course, that's why we watch sports. That's the important part to all of us. But the community, the fan engagement is important. I think that no club can sustain themselves without an incredible fan base. When I was in Memphis in the USL, a level far below, was able to help build a football club from the ground up with nothing, no resources, but the ones we put into it. And we were able to create a thriving organization, and through that, I saw the power and the impact that you can have in a local community. And to me, being able to be a part of the Houston family is important. It's important to me, both on a professional but on a personal level as well. And ultimately, in closing, our hope as an ownership group, and certainly as an individual, is to make sure that Houston, on both the men and women's side, is the premier global destination for anybody coming to America. And we're well on the way because of the deep championship winning roots that we have here, but hopefully that's for many more years to come. So thank you for today.
Thank you both, Ted and Tim. We will now open up for questions from media in the audience. In the front, John B's going to bring you the mic behind you.
Hey, good morning. Josh Spencer with Texan Army, one of the supporters groups. So before I get to my question, I also just want to point out there's another connection that Tim has with Houston. In 2003, he was getting one of his first starts with the U.S. national team against Mexico in what is now NRG Center, and Manchester United sent one of their scouts to watch that match, and it was shortly thereafter that he got the call to jump abroad to Manchester United and eventually went to Everton. So he has some connections to Houston as well. I was at that match. I distinctly remember. Well,
it's a great memory because I remember everything, and I forgot about that. An amazing day, for sure.
I guess the first question is, how often can we expect to go and see you here not only at the stadium, but also in Houston? And secondly, when I was watching the Euros and the Copa America final over the weekend, I continually got the same response that I always get is, we have a huge soccer community here in Houston. Oh, I support this team, this team, this team. How about the Dynamo? Never been to a match. So my question is also, what do you think you can do in order to convert some of these football fans that already exist in Houston into becoming Dynamo fans?
Brilliant start to the Q&A. I mean, I'm smiling because I'm thinking of the greatest rivalry in the world, USA-Mexico. What an incredible game. Yeah, it kickstarted my European career as well. How often can you see me? I love football. I ooze it. I want to be around it. I want to be around the game. I've already got my phone ringing off the hook about people wanting to come and watch the Dynamo and the Dash. Again, with the proximity of so many games, both on the men and women's side, I'll be at a lot of games. Whether that's here in Houston, hopefully as often as I can, but certainly around the country, watching our teams and doing business for our teams in those markets. But yeah, the plan is to be here and to be present, and I've told the players that as well. Like, I'm going to be as present as I can, both through my phone and in person, and to help in any way I can. That's not empty. I continue to say, people say it all the time, I'm a phone call away, and I'm happy to talk football. I love it. I like to analyze it. I like to figure out what works, what doesn't on the business side, on the field. The last part of your question is the most amazing question you could have ever asked. It's something that Ted and I talked about 10 days ago in New York. It's something that I have very high-level conversations with some really intellectual, intelligent people in the game of football. Across the board in America, we have to do better, because I see that. I see that when I played in Denver. I see it in my home market in New York, New Jersey. That's a real thing. That's a real factor. There are football fans amongst us who haven't been to a game. I get it. I see that. I don't have the answer for you right this second. What I will tell you is there's priorities 1 and 1A. That's one on my football checklist. Before today, I've had these conversations constantly. I ran the team in Memphis. Same issue. There are soccer fans there that would prefer to stay in the pub and watch Manchester United versus Chelsea, but won't come to our game. That is an American soccer problem that I truly believe will get solved. That's not pie in the sky. That's something we can solve. Look, ultimately, it's about community connectivity and offering a safe place, a place where people feel welcome and wanted and appreciated across the board at a very high level. So again, I never ever like to dodge questions. I never will. But I can tell you that's why I love the question, because it's something that I spend a lot of hours on, even in my regular daily life, having coffee or having a beer, because it's something that is, I've been kicking a soccer ball in America for a very long time, since probably 1986. And it's something that's kind of haunted us for a long time. So we're on it. I can assure you that.
Okay, one question right here, and then I'll come to you.
George Sapone from Dynamo Fan TV. Tim, welcome to Houston. A question, what can the fans expect from you and Ted Siegel going forward with this ownership?
Hopefully a progressive thought process and plan of action that we can put in place. Certainly Ted and the group have done that since they've taken over the organizations. But look, I think when it comes to running and operating a football club, everything needs to be on the table. Every voice needs to be heard. Players' complaints, likes and dislikes. Fans' complaints, likes and dislikes. How do we get more sponsors through the door? There's, it's a broad spectrum. I've mentioned to our team at HQ in every single way possible to use me in terms of boots on the ground. I have a lot of connections in the game that, as I mentioned, my phone's ringing off the hook because now Houston is something they're interested in, right? And for me, it's important to leverage as many of those relationships and build a perennial contender that wins on both the men's and women's side. That's ultimately why we're in the game, is to win. You don't have a divine right to win. Losing hurts, but ultimately the idea is to put a competitive team, because I think when you look at football across the board, for me, all fans want is a competitive team that have the opportunity to win. No one wins every game, except Arsenal back in 2003. I did save a penalty, and we missed one, but that's for another day. Most teams don't win all the time, and what fans want more than anything is a commitment from their group, an idea that we have the right path to winning, even if it doesn't happen every week, and that's something that I'm committed to from my end. And again, it's day one on the job. Well, it's not. It's officially day one. I was doing some work behind the scenes for the Dash last week in terms of a player, but that's, again, there is nothing that I'm not willing to lift on. So Ted can speak to his part of it, but for me, again, whether that's the fans, the players, or the front office, I'm in.
Yeah, I think just in the process of getting to Tim within our ownership, it was a very constructive dialogue, and I think we're going to maintain and expand on that, so it's going to be very collaborative. I think from my perspective, why do you ever bring on an additional partner? I don't have to, but there has to be a good reason to do it. And so I think I would distill it into perspective and platform, right? Tim brings a perspective that I don't have, and so that we now have within our ownership. His perspective from seeing the game of soccer for the last 25 years around the world. What are the best things that you can do for the player, for the fan, for our infrastructure, for amplifying the game, and that's the platform part of it, right? Again, I'm a fairly mild-mannered guy who flies under the radar. Tim is on NBC Sports every weekend, in your kitchen or in your living room, and has the ability to elevate our teams, our brand, globally in a way that I can never imagine. So again, it's beneficial to our organization to have his perspective and his platform.
Thank you. Chris?
Hi, Tim. My name is Chris Caters, ASN Sports TV. Welcome to Houston, the land of everything. We're excited to have you here. But your accolades are enormous. You've played in everything, the World Cup. You've played in Manchester United, one of the best clubs in the world. I know that, right? You spoke about fans engagement. I said in 2014, LAFC bought a franchise. Prior to that kickoff in 2018, LAFC sent a group of people to Borussia Dortmund to understudy the fan base. And that's where they created the 3252. And you can tell that today the LAFC fan base 3252 is one of the biggest fan bases in the United States. So what strategy, and you with your experience and what you've gotten with your experience, like how can you leverage your experience to try to bring that kind of energy to the stadium? Because if you go to Houston and the parks every weekend, it's full with people playing soccer.
Correct.
People love soccer here. They love it. So what strategy or what model are you going to emulate to try and convert this already soccer-loving people to become fans of Houston Dynamo?
Yeah, another great question. Where are you from? Originally?
Nigeria.
Of course you are. Yeah, of course. I played with 3 world-class Nigerians. The captain, Joseph Yobo, a captain of Nigeria, and he had family here in Houston, so I know it's a proud community. Our very similar to the first question, our parks are filled. They are. Our parks and our streets and our pubs and restaurants are filled with soccer fans, not just in Houston, across this country. And it's an enormous challenge. How do we do that? We have to not only make the game day experience financially affordable, sustainable, safe, all of the things that go in, all of the buzzwords that go into that within the stadium, but it's also getting into those communities and pinpointing certain groups. It's as simple as whether that be football clubs, whether that be local businesses. It's important that we turn them over and convert them into Dynamo and Dash fans. That doesn't happen overnight. Football fans are stubborn. They are, and that's what makes them great. It is truly what makes them great. And as I said, what LAFC did is an incredible marker that they laid down, because I've played there. I've seen it. I've witnessed it. In fact, one of my favorite tattoo artists that I just saw out in LA recently, and I got tattooed by. He's he's one of the original founders of their supporters group, and he raves about it. So maybe the answer is I'll speak more to him, and I'll get the secrets, because he'd be happy. You know, while he's torturing me for hours, I can get those secrets. But no, I mean that honestly. Part of my job is to, as Ted mentioned, best practices, to travel, to use my connections and my relationships to leverage and figure out what are people doing to pack out their supporters groups and have those conversations. And again, Atlanta's doing a very similar thing. You know, I'm the godfather to Carlos Bocanegra's child, and he's the president there, so he owes me a few secrets. And so these are things that I plan on doing. You know, on a business front, wearing the Houston hat, is to go into those markets and have those tough conversations and find out what we can do to be even better.
Diego.
Hi, Tim. Diego Martinez Reyes from The Shot Magazine. Could you talk a little bit about your time with Memphis and some of the things that you've learned now that you've moved on to the MLS here with Houston?
Gosh, I learned a lot of lessons in Memphis. What a great group we had. You know, building a club from the ground up is a pretty special thing to be a part of. You know, I talked to our folks at HQ, and I said, when you're a part owner in a USL club, you're taking tickets, you're doing sponsorship dinners, you're converting a baseball field to a soccer field, and when it starts to thunderstorm, and you guys know about rain, you run from your office down the stairs and you pull the tarp, and it looks like a baseball game. You're pulling this tarp across, and you know, I say that to be funny, but it's the truth. And I think you learn a lot about. For me, that was priceless. I came from playing at the highest level. Every player, whether they tell you or not, they have a God complex. They think the world revolves around them. I certainly did. And then you get into trying to build a football club. You make a lot of mistakes, and you learn a lot about people. That's what I learned. I learned how important the people next to me were. I always knew how important the fans were, but you get a different sense of that when you're, you know, my job as a player is to throw my face in front of balls and win matches, and you better come watch, right? Like that. That's normal. But when you're on the other side of it, it's really getting down to the nitty gritty about what it is a fan wants from their experience. Trying to be adaptable on the fly, you know, when it comes to fan engagement, when it comes to dealing with agents. So the greatest thing I could have done was humble myself and figure out I didn't know it all. I knew almost all about playing. I didn't know much about the other side of it, and I got a crash course in how to run an organization, both on the good and the bad. But again, it's about the people. It's about relationships and understanding that there's a common struggle, that we're not always going to get along, that we're not always going to see eye to eye. But ultimately, the fans want exactly what the ownership wants, and ownership wants exactly what the players want. And there's this complete triangle that becomes a family, and if you can figure that out, then you're well on your way. And so for me, it was about people and about relationships, and you build it brick by brick.
Thank you. Rudy.
Hello, Tim. Welcome to Houston. Rudy Segura with Bayou City Soccer. Curious about your relationship with Ben Olsen and just maybe the current status of the Dynamo.
Ben and I go way back. I always say, if you want dirt on him, just give me a holler. I went to. He was actually a really good player. I know you guys are thinking that guy was a good player. He was good. 2000, we went to the Olympics together. 2006, we went to the World Cup in Germany. Played against him a bunch, and unfortunately, he was ravaged with injuries at the end. But what a player, what a guy, and I've just known him for forever. And someone who. What I love about, you asked me the question about learning how to run an organization in Memphis, and Ben got thrown into the coaching world when he wasn't ready. He'll tell you that. They needed a coach, and he was it. He was Mr. DC, and so he learned so much through the tough times, and what it was like to be in an organization that obviously had tons of success, but at the beginning he struggled, and he's learned a lot. He has a real good way with the players. I think Ben, Ted and I were talking today, the greatest thing about Ben is I've known him for 25 years, and He's the same. He's exactly the same. Good days, bad days. He never shirks his responsibilities. He's always going to let you know how he's feeling, what's important, and that resonates with the players. And you can see that. And he's adaptable as a coach, and that's important. And obviously, the run. I think the run that the Dynamo have been on is a good one. They've been resilient. You can see that. You can see that they've been tested. I talked to our folks at HQ about these are the dog days of summer. No other league in the world has to deal with this, but it's our reality, and it makes or breaks teams. And when I stand in front of the team today, I see a team that's energized. That's also bolstered by the fact that there's a new signing in the building, and I talked about it. It's incredible. I wish some of you could feel what it's like to be in a dressing room and to have rumors swirling about a new player coming in, and then they get signed. And even as a senior player, I was captain of the Colorado Rapids from 2016 to 2019. Had a good start to my career there. Then we had some tough days, and I can remember every time the transfer window opened, we were like giddy little kids on Christmas morning because we're like, this guy's going to change our fortunes. And whether that, I think it will, but whether that is the truth or not, it gives everybody this lift and this euphoria that we can then kick on from here. And so the team looks like it's in a really good place. And so obviously this was my first time physically being around them, but there'll be more of that to come.
Thanks. Luis?
Luis Ortiz from KHOU. Ted, good to see you again. Tim, welcome to Houston. A question for each of you. Ted, you mentioned earlier, you didn't have to bring in someone else, right? So I'm wondering if you can share with us, how did this come about? How did you end up, starting to talk to Tim, and what did you see that, you wanted to bring him on board? And then for Tim, for you, what do you see as the biggest challenge for the Houston Dynamo, and how would you like to address it?
Yeah, so as I mentioned in my remarks, and as some of you know, our history goes back 30 plus years. We grew up in the same town. Tim's a couple of years older than me, and so like many of you, I've watched him from the stands. It just happened to be that it was at a much earlier point, and it made me quickly realize that I wasn't going to be where he was going to be one day. Look, followed his career with great pride and admiration, and then watched his impressive transition to what he was doing in Memphis and what he was doing at NBC Sports, and again, thinking about the criteria of what is beneficial to an ownership and bringing on additional partners. This is a guy with a wealth of soccer knowledge, an unbelievable connectivity to the world of soccer and beyond. And then really at his core, when we reconnected, and this was back in January, when we started exploring the opportunity, because it made so much sense for the reasons I described, kind of an alignment in thinking, and with that kind of foundational commonality of experiences that we were bringing to the table, that just made it an easygoing conversation that developed over the next 6 months as we talked more and more about the world of soccer, life in Houston, what our plans are for growing the Dynamo and Dash, and just broader things about life as two guys in their 40s with kids and ambitions. And so part of it is, again, his extensive qualifications, and part of it is the individual, the person who is sitting next to me. So you got to kind of cross both those thresholds for it to make sense, and of course he did with flying colors.
Thank you. Do we have any more questions in the room?
Yeah, I had asked.
Sorry, this was also the...
Sorry.
Yeah, the biggest challenge, well, it's sports. It's all a challenge. Look, I think on both the Dino and Dash side, for me, the ample answer is simple. The roadmap to get there is more complex, but you have to create a culture within a team that people want to show up every day, and that the idea of the team and the organization is bigger than any issue, because there are issues every single day. It's impossible not to have that. But that extends to the fan base as well, right? And so when you talk about building a culture within a team, that's something that can be rooted in a strong foundation, but it can be sustainable. Because what happens with football is there's turnover. Guys get injured, girls get injured, someone gets transferred, someone gets traded, a new coach. All these crazy things happen that the people on the inside aren't in control of. But if you can show up every day with the idea that the organization, the orange is most important, then that culture piece for me becomes the bedrock of your success. How do I help build that? Well, again, best practices, trying to align myself and be somewhat of a bridge between, as Ted talked about, the players and the front office staff and the fans, being able to absorb so many of the concerns of all of those parties involved. Look, when it comes to football, I'm non-risk averse. I think you make the best decisions, you stick with those, and see what happens. And if you fail, then you figure it out from there. Like I'm not someone who holds on to the reins and pulls back. I think in football particularly, you've got to go full speed ahead. And so, look, I think the challenge is to continue to build culture. Not that we don't have it. Houston has a great footballing culture, and as do the Dash and Dynamo under this ownership. But for me, it's about further. Like it can never be too great, if that makes sense. No matter how good the team is, no matter how great the vibe is, because remember, we're in a sport where the culture feels really good when you win 1-0 and horrific on the plane after you've lost 3-0. And so there has to be a bigger value system. There has to be a bigger cause for everybody, and that's embedded in the culture. And so that's with each team, and how I can help that, I'm open to all strategies.
Thank you. Now I'll switch to the next question in the room. We'll go to you.
Hi there. My name is Herman Benitez with Foxtrot TV. Hi, Ted. Hello, Tim. Welcome to Houston. It's been reported that your purchase of the stake in the club is higher than the current valuation. To me, that signifies a long-term approach, investment. During your initial evaluation of the club, the short week that you've had, what has stood out as something positive, and what's something that you can immediately see and focus, we must fix this in the long term? Thank you.
Done your homework, thank you. Yeah, look, this is absolutely, it's a long-term process. I've mentioned before about groups that I've talked to and why I didn't make the jump and join those organizations. It's because of the reason why I joined here, talking to Ted and the group. There's a vision plan for these clubs, and it's long term, and that's I don't fly by the seat of my pants. I wanna be involved in an organization that feels like family. I mentioned the players, the friends that I've played with who have been a part of the Houston Dynamo and Dash. I obviously I haven't played on the women's game, but I know a few of the women who have been through Houston, and they rave about their life here, their experience here, their footballing life, and what that meant to them. And so, for me, that was why, when you talk about the current valuation, this is long term. I'm in it for the long haul, to be present here for many, many years. What could get I mean, you could probably tell me what needs fixing. I've been here 12 hours, but look, I think that the vision plan for the stadium and the training ground, and of course our HQ, and the Dynamo buying up parts of the city, and Dash buying up parts of the city, so that we can make it our own, and that this is a footballing city. I think that's the challenge, but also the fun part of this. I know all about the Texans and the Rockets and the Astros, and they're phenomenal. But this is a football town. It's a footballing town, and I think that that will continue to be our biggest challenge. Again, we talk about all these challenges that are here in Houston, and we've mentioned about putting butts in seats, and what's our biggest challenge? That's soccer in America. That's the challenge for all of us. But that's not important to me. What's important to me is Houston and how we continue to charge forward. So making people recognize the Dash and the Dynamo in the city is number one for me. And again, that you say, what can be fixed? Nothing can get fixed today. But when you're in sports, it's all about results, number one, but also that runs completely parallel to that is the fans and the experience that they have, not just in the stadium, because it goes beyond 90 minutes. You all aren't fans for 90 minutes on one day a week. You're fans for life. It runs your life. I know. I'm a fan as well, and it runs my life. And so, that experience has to be different than anything else.
I think we have one in the back. Okay, then we'll go to Zoom.
We saw kind of what happened when David Beckham stepped into Miami and kind of the figure and the role of being an ex-player. How big is it to have somebody like Pat already as an ex-player and now Tim, which I can already imagine how those keeper conversations are going to go. But how big is that? Because you mentioned it early about bringing players and kind of what that does to a team.
I think the opportunity is massive, right? First of all, you touched on it. I think we have, prior to Tim coming in, an outstanding organization in terms of player identification, recruitment, and that's something that a lot of credit has to go to Pat and Asher for building out, because it was non-existent when I came here 3 years ago. And I think the results on the pitch speak for themselves, and nobody's going to bat 1,000, but I think they've done a phenomenal job, and the proof is in our results over the last couple of years, where they've had real control over how to constitute our roster. So first of all, let's give existing credit, but then to supercharge it with somebody like Tim, and to enhance those recruitment efforts, so it's not just me trying to speak my broken Spanish on a Zoom with Hector and his family, which I had to do a couple times, and I'm proud to do, and I will do at any time if it's an enhancement in our recruiting efforts. But then and I saw it at the training facility today, the respect, sometimes reverence, that these players on the Dynamo and Dash side have for a legendary player like Tim. It carries a different weight. It carries a different sort of resonance with the players, our existing ones, and probably ones that we'll be recruiting. So to the extent that Tim is willing and able, and it's helpful to help bring on new players, I think it's going to be invigorating to those processes, which are already proving to be so successful based on ID and data, and getting successful players over to the finish line.
Awesome. I think we have time for one more question in the room, and then we'll go to 2 on Zoom and wrap. Please go ahead.
Hey, Tim, welcome to Houston. Having said that, how involved or how outspoken do you expect to be in the decision-making going forward, as far as Dynamo, as far as the Dash, not being afraid to pick up the phone and talk to Ted Siegel?
Well, I'm not afraid to talk to Ted. Ted's not afraid to talk to me. Look, for me, I've always been, I talked before, always been about relationship building and connectivity, and I think you need that in an organization. How involved will I be? Heavily involved. I think first and foremost, I want to get up to speed with the critical members in the football club, both on the men's and women's side, in both groups, and front office and players, and be able to translate that in a real way to Ted, who obviously has his finger on the pulse of everything and understands what needs doing. But just another set of eyes and ears, so we can toss around ideas and figure out what makes the most sense. So, my involvement is high. I think it will continue to ramp up as we move forward. Of course, once you get comfortable in a position, and here's the other thing: we're talking about people, and it's all nice and well that I've done a lot of things in the game, but people ultimately have to get comfortable with me as a person on a daily basis, on a level where they can pick up the phone and just talk, that I don't have agendas, that I actually care. I mean, that's the most important thing. Today's great, but it's what do I do moving forward, right? And you have to build trust. The only way you build trust is through consistency, through being present, being that consistent voice. So I'll look to do that. I'll continue to do that as the days and weeks and months and years go on. but yes, heavily involved. I didn't get involved in this just to kind of sit around. I can do that all by myself, you know. So being involved in the game that we all love is, I'm very fortunate. I'm in a very fortunate position because this is special. It's a special organization. It's the greatest sport in the world, and it's something that I live and breathe.
Okay, we'll throw to 2 questions on Zoom that we have.
Hello, Tim. First of all, welcome to Houston. I wanted to ask if you've already spoken to the Dynamo players and what your message is to them and the coaching staff.
Thank you for your question. I did. I spoke to them. I shuddered at the sight of Hector Herrera. I mean, you want to talk about a guy who ran me ragged for a number of years. I was happy to be on his side. I can tell you that. Special player, special human. It was great. It was great to meet the guys. A few of them, oddly, I even played against. And you know, I think it was, for me, it's special to be around the group because being a footballer is so hard. It's so intense. It's so emotional. It's so draining. It's special, but I almost envy them because to be in their shoes and to be living that dream every single day, trying to become great and chase greatness is not something that's afforded to all of us. So it's a good group. It's a really good group led by Ben and Pat and Asher, and I just think it's you know, from the outside looking in, understanding what a good team looks like and feels like, it's special to be a part of this group.
Thank you, Juan. We're going to throw to Dustin on Zoom.
Hey, Tim. Welcome to Houston. Hey, I just wanted to ask you about the Dash. I know you have a daughter that's now playing college soccer. There seems to be this renaissance of women's sports, right, in the U.S., and the Dash have kind of been a sleeping giant, it feels like, for so long. Just what do you see as the growth for this club here in Houston, especially on the women's side?
Yeah, it's a great question. I think I'm so invested in women's sports in general, but you know, having a daughter play the game at a high level, dreaming of, you know, trust me, I had some interesting conversations with her regarding the Dash, and I said that's not exactly how it works, but but you know, yes, listen, it would be her dream to live and play in Houston. So I think the great thing that we've seen in the NWSL is how quickly growth and turnaround can happen within organizations, and that's exciting. You know, and we probably saw that with Gotham very recently, their ability to change things around very quickly. And as you said, sleeping giant is an incredible phrase and one that's very accurate because Houston Dash is on the lips of everyone in NWSL, and how can we continue to push that forward and create, one, lasting memories, but two, a championship caliber team. Obviously, big challenge, but it's there, and I think the foundation is set. So again, and I think your question is important for me to elaborate on. I'm not just here for the men's side of the game. I have an equal interest in growing the women's game and creating a championship caliber football on that side as well, because that's to me important.
Thank you, everyone, for attending. That will conclude our press conference for now. We will have photo ops available right here in the front, so if you give us a second, we'll get set up, and then we'll have refreshments in the back as well. Thank you so much for attending, and welcome to Houston.
Thank you.
Let's get one of those back.